Good afternoon, everyone. It's Dave with Alaskan Homesteading. Today, on this cloudy, slightly snowy, cool South Central Alaskan day, I am going to work on my sawmill. I relocated it over here by the woodshed, mostly because I wanted it out of the driveway so that I'd have room to move vehicles around a little more easily, but also because a lot of the work that I'm doing with the mill actually ends up being lumber that I'm using for the shed itself. And one of the nice things about having a trailerable sawmill like this Woodland Mills HM136 Woodlander is that you can move it around at will. The thing that I have to do today is re-level it. When I moved it, I kind of got it basically level, but it's not really sitting quite right, and so I bought myself a longer level to use to get this to get it fixed up a little bit. So I'm going to work on that, and time permitting and weather allowing, I'll go ahead and mill this log that's here. Let's get started. Looking at the mill, you can see that there's some jacks along the side that are for leveling and stabilizing the mill. And this whole process of leveling it generally doesn't take too long as you've got the right tools and a methodical process. So I'm going to go bunk to bunk with this level and start making some adjustments and see if I can get the level of it tuned up a little bit. The problem I have right now is the one end is a little high, and so the mill head wants to roll that direction instead of being flat, so that when I push it, one direction or the other, it'll just sort of coast in that direction. You don't really want it to be so unlevel that sitting in one spot, it'll start to roll on its own. So right now, the bubble is that way, which means I need to bring the back end up or lower the front end. In this case, I think what I'm going to do is bring up this middle jack and see what happens. So the middle jack is no longer in contact with the ground, the bubble hasn't moved. That means that at the very least, the trailer hasn't sagged in this spot. The frame of this thing is really quite rigid, so even with a pretty sizable log on it, it stays pretty straight. Now I got to do the same on the other side. So yeah, bubble hasn't moved. We're still in the same orientation we were in. And we'll just check bunk to bunk at each one. Yep, looks good. So let's go ahead and start lowering the front here to bring the bubble back in the other direction. So we got to lower on both sides independently, because you'll end up tilting the sawmill either left or right. We still got a little ways to go. I think while I'm at it, I'll raise the back end a little bit as well. Getting a little closer, it'll take some time. That's very close. I'd say that's about as dead on level front to back as it gets. Now I gotta check on the other bunks. Still looks quite good. Maybe a hair low in the front, looking at it this way. That looks very good. And some of these, I don't want to put too much stock in what this one bubble says in this one spot, because there can be slight variances in the bunks themselves. So what really matters is the overall level front to back, and for that I really need to get a laser level out here to run from the far back bunk all the way up to the far front. Again, looking quite good. And quite good here as well. So now let's take a look left to right. So you can see now we need to bring the operator side of the mill up just a touch, at least at this bunk. Let's take a look at the front one. Same. And across the frame rails here at the back, same deal. And back here we have about the same amount of unlevelness left to right. So what this is telling me right now is that I need to make the same adjustment to all three jacks on one side of the mill or the other, because I don't want to change the front to back leveling. I want to change the side to side leveling. So I'm going to go to each crank and turn it, say, 3 times and see where we end up with level left to right now that I've got front to back done. I'm skipping this one because it's not in contact with the ground right now. That 3 cranks might have been too much, so we'll take it down 1. And take another look. Alright, at the back end, looks great. Check the middle. Also looks very good. And the front looks very good. Now, because we made some changes, I'm going to recheck front to back level just to be sure. Still looks very good. Yep, good. That same variance that I think is just, this bunk is slightly taller than that one. Yeah. Okay. Now that I've got it level, front to back and left to right, I can put these feet down so they're just touching the ground and supporting the weight. But I don't want to use them to adjust anything at this point. I just want them in contact so that they're stabilizing and supporting. So really that means cranking it down until it meets resistance and really no further, because I don't want to see that bubble move. I just want to feel resistance in this crank to the point where I know that it's providing some support but not adjusting the angle of the mill. Alright, well, to my eye, with that level, it looks quite good. So the next test is, we'll take the cover off the mill head, take the pin out of the base, and try and run the carriage up and down and see how it feels. Well, that's great. This rolls really nice and smoothly. It doesn't run away from you, and it stays where you set it. That is just perfect. That's what I need out of it. Now, I guess I better mill this log before the weather sets in. Well, as you can see, that's rolling really nice and smooth. It doesn't continue very far. It doesn't run away. It stops where you leave it. And so that's exactly how level I want it. It just works the way it's supposed to. It's nice and smooth. Okay, well, I guess I better go get myself set up to mill this log. I've got a 12-foot spruce log on here, about, I don't know, I forget, 15 or 16 inches in diameter. I had a tree that fell a few weeks ago. I already milled part of it. This is the next section, and we'll just see what we can get out of this one. So far, I've been torquing this to 25 pounds on this torque wrench every time, and it's been working fine. The spec printed on here is 20 to 25 foot-pounds, and I have just been using that with no issues. Your mill may be different depending on what year yours is from. Mine happens to be a 2021 model. I've heard that different people have had different experiences with different torque settings on different mills. So your mileage may vary. Don't take my 25-pound setting as gospel. It isn't. I came up with my own solution for dust collection. I just have a bucket mounted here, hanging off of the thermos, aka instruction manual container, using just a bungee to hold it in place. Really the simplest possible thing that could work. That's all I wanted out of this for right now. I may come up with something else at some other future time, but for now, this has been working. And this bungee has no problem holding a completely full bucket of dust. I just want to top off the fuel before I get started, because I don't want to have another episode where I run out partway through a cut. I'll tell you, if somebody could come up with a better way to manage fuel for all these small engines, you know, those EPA cans and government regulated cans with their silly spring loaded nozzles and everything, they are just a mess. This is a little better, but it's still, I mean, I've never found a way to do this without spilling. You know, yeah, I guess I could use a funnel, that might help, but boy, pouring gasoline in all these small engines is just, it just always a mess. And the other thing that's really lacking here is I sure wish that they had a gauge, even a just really primitive gauge on here, to get some idea of how full the tank is, because there's no way, you know, looking in the top, there's a little mesh filter screen and you can't really see the level. You can kind of listen for it as you pour the fuel in, but it's just a mess. The bottom line is I have nothing good to say about fueling small engines. Choke on, fuel on. Bring that down to half choke. Yeah, it definitely is finicky on these colder days. Well, I got about a 10 by 10 cant out of this. Obviously, there's some wane on here, so I can't mill a 10 by 10 beam out of this. The other unfortunate news is there's some pretty deep cracks inside this log that were not visible from the surface, and so some sections of this might end up being firewood. I'm not really sure. I think I might try and take off, about a 2x on the top here and see what I get. You can kind of see the crack at the end. So, you know, if you'd looked at the checking on the end of the log, you might have seen that and thought, well, there could be a long crack through here. But the truth of the matter is, you just never really know until you open it up what's going to be in there. But you can see this crack runs a good 6 feet at least, you know, more like 8 feet through here. So I'm not sure what I'll get out of this, but being optimistic, I think I can get like kind of a 2x10 off of this edge, and we'll see what comes out of it next after we expose the rest of this crack. Okay, folks, that's all the time I've got for today. I got finished up just in the nick of time. As you might be able to see, we've got the snow just sort of starting to fall here, and we are supposed to get anywhere from an inch to 12 inches, depending on who you believe. I don't put too much stock in these forecasts. Most of them are wrong anyway. But I got a nice bit of milling done. I'm pretty happy with the lumber. A couple of the pieces I'm going to they'll be firewood just because there's long cracks through them and they won't be really good for much. But I did get a couple of pretty good size beams out of it, some 2x6s, 2x4, some 1x material. So a nice assortment of things that I know I'll be able to use. I've got some fascia board to finish up on the back of the shed here and some other miscellaneous pieces. Right. Now that it's begun to snow, I'm going to go ahead and get myself cleaned up, get all my stuff put away, cover up the mill, and shut down for the day. Probably go in and start a nice little fire and relax for a little while. Thanks so much for watching. If you're enjoying these videos, give me that thumbs up. If you want to see more, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.